They betrayed me, laughed, and spent my money. She never loved you, my brother sneered, while she smirked, tossing our wedding ring away. I stayed silent, just watching. Let them enjoy it, while they can. 4 days later, their voices shook, with fear on the phone. That's when they realized I was never as naive as they thought. I've always been a creature of habit, finding comfort in the predictable rhythms of life. But that evening, as I turned the key in the lock of our modest suburban home, something felt off. The usual symphony of Emily's laughter was missing, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung heavy in the air. I stepped inside, my briefcase feeling unusually heavy in my hand. The house was dark, save for the dim light spilling from the kitchen. My heart skipped a beat as I approached, the quietness amplifying every sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor. There she was, Emily, her back to me, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mark stood beside her, his face etched with a concern. That seemed out of character for his usual carefree demeanor. Emily? My voice broke the silence, a whisper that seemed to echo in the stillness. She turned, her eyes red and swollen, tears streaking down her cheeks. Jake, she managed, her voice trembling. I found something today. My mind raced. What could have possibly shattered our simple, happy life in the span of a few hours? I glanced at Mark, seeking some clue in his expression, but he merely shook his head, his lips pressed into a thin line. Emily reached into her pocket, pulling out a small, crumpled piece of paper. She handed it to me, her hand trembling. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the words that seemed to blur together. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. It's over. The note was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My heart sank as I realized the implications. Jake, I didn't know how to tell you. The next morning, I woke up to find Emily's side of the bed empty. Her scent lingered on the pillow, a cruel reminder of her absence. Her closet was half empty, and her favorite suitcase was gone. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Mark was nowhere to be seen either. My heart sank, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she needed some space, maybe they went on an impromptu trip. Days passed, and there was no word from either of them. My calls went unanswered, and my texts were left unread. At work, I was distracted, my mind constantly wandering back to the empty house. The silence of our home was deafening, each tick of the clock a reminder of the void left by Emily's laughter. Then, one evening, as I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Emily. I'm sorry. Jake, I need time to think. I felt betrayed, confused, but I held on to hope. I decided to give her the space she asked for, thinking perhaps she was going through something she couldn't share. My mind was a whirlwind of scenarios, each more painful than the last. What was she thinking about? Where had she gone? The unanswered questions gnawed at me. Was she with Mark? The thought stung like a betrayal, yet part of me couldn't believe she'd leave without a word, without a fight. I replayed our last moments together, her tears, the note, Mark's unusual concern. I remembered the way she looked at me when she handed me that note, her eyes searching mine for understanding, for forgiveness. I wondered if a week later, I received a call from my bank. My heart raced as I checked my online banking. My savings were nearly depleted. That's when I saw it. Transactions made, in a city far from Columbus, where Emily and Mark had been spotted together. I drove to the address linked to the transactions, a small, cozy apartment. There I found them. Emily, with a look of guilt mixed with defiance, and Mark, who had the audacity to smirk at me. She was never happy with you anyway, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Emily tossed our wedding ring into the trash, her words cutting deep. You were just a stepping stone, Jake. I stood there, absorbing the betrayal, but I didn't react as they expected. Instead, I smiled, a knowing smile, and left without a word. Here's why I smiled. I had a plan. 1. that had been brewing in my mind since the moment I found that note. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. You see, while Emily and Mark thought they had outsmarted me, I had been quietly setting things in motion. First, I contacted a private investigator. I needed to know everything, their whereabouts, their plans, their secrets. The PI confirmed my worst fears. They were indeed together, living off my money, thinking they were untouchable. But here's the twist. I had already transferred most of my savings into a new account, one they couldn't touch. The transactions they made were from the remaining funds, which I had intentionally left as bait. I knew they'd take the money, and when they did, I had them right where I wanted them. I also visited my lawyer, setting up a legal trap. Emily's actions, her abandonment, and the unauthorized withdrawals were all documented. With the evidence, I could not only freeze the remaining funds, but also initiate legal proceedings for fraud and theft. As I drove away from that apartment, my smile wasn't just about knowing I had outsmarted them. It was about the realization that I was free. Free from the lies, the deceit, and the hollow shell of a marriage. Over the next few days, I meticulously planned my next move. I had anticipated this betrayal, having seen the signs of their growing closeness. I had set up a separate account, transferring most of my money there, leaving just enough in the joint account to make it look untouched. I watched from a distance as they lived their new life, funded by what they thought was my money. They were oblivious to the fact that I had already moved my assets, leaving them with nothing but the debts they were accruing. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Emily, her voice frantic. "Jake, we need to talk. It's urgent," I answered, my voice calm. "What do you want, Emily?" There was a pause, a heavy breath on the other end. Then she spoke, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Jake, I made a mistake. Mark, he's not who I thought he was. He's been using me, using us to get to your money." I felt a cold satisfaction, but I kept my tone neutral. "Go on." "He's been lying to me, Jake. He told me you had left us, that you didn't care anymore. But I found out he's been planning this for months. He's got debts, Jake. Big ones. He's been siphoning off what he thought was all our money. But now he's saying if we don't pay him back, he'll expose us." I could hear the fear in her voice, the desperation. "Expose you how?" "He has pictures, Jake, of us, together. He says he'll send them to everyone if we don't give him more money. I'm scared, Jake. I didn't know what he was capable of." I let the silence hang for a moment, letting her stew in her own panic. "Emily, you've made your bed, but here's the thing. I've already taken steps to protect myself. You and Mark have been spending money that isn't there. The account you've been draining is nearly empty, and the rest, well, it's out of your reach. I met them at a cafe. Their faces pale, their demeanor desperate. The money's gone, Jake," Emily said, her voice breaking. "We've been trying to use it, but it's all gone." I leaned back, sipping my coffee. "Oh, you mean the money you stole? That money was never yours to take." I explained how I had moved my funds, how I had anticipated their betrayal. Their expressions turned from shock to horror as they realized they were left with nothing but the debts they had racked up. Mark tried to argue, to threaten, but I cut him off. "You both made your choice. Now live with it." I stood up, leaving them to face the reality of their actions. As I walked away, I could feel the weight of their stares on my back. They were now in a world of trouble, with no financial safety net to catch them. Emily's betrayal had cost her everything, and Mark, well, he was just a pawn in his own game of deceit. I knew what would happen to them now. Emily would likely return, to her family, tail between her legs, begging for help. Her parents, who had always disapproved of our marriage, would be less than thrilled to see her, especially in such dire straits. They might take her in, but the trust would be shattered, the relationship strained beyond repair. Mark, on the other hand, had no such fallback. His debts were his own, accrued through his gambling and his schemes. Without the money, he thought, he had secured from me, He'd be on the run from creditors, his life spiraling into chaos. His so-called friends would vanish like smoke, leaving him isolated and desperate. I imagined them, Emily trying to rebuild her life, perhaps finding a job, living in some small, cramped apartment, her dreams of luxury now a distant memory. Mark, meanwhile, might end up in a worse situation, possibly even facing legal consequences for his debts, his threats, his manipulations. Their future was bleak, a stark contrast to the life they had envisioned. They would have to navigate the consequences of their actions, the fallout from their betrayal. Emily might find some months passed. I rebuilt my life, focusing on my career, finding solace in solitude, and occasionally in the company of new friends. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Emily and Mark had split, unable to handle the financial strain. Emily returned to her parents while Mark moved out of state, his charm no longer enough to keep him afloat. I never sought revenge. The truth was, they had done that to themselves. I found peace in knowing that sometimes justice doesn't need to be served. It serves itself. As I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of closure. Life had moved on, and so had I. The lessons I learned were profound. Trust, once broken, is hard to mend. I realized that the foundation of any relationship is trust, and without it, everything crumbles. Emily's betrayal taught me to be more cautious, to listen to the whispers of doubt that sometimes echo in the quiet moments. Material wealth is fleeting, but integrity endures. I watched as Mark's schemes unraveled, leaving him with nothing but his debts. It was a stark reminder that shortcuts and deceit might offer temporary gains, but they lead to a hollow victory. My own actions, setting up a legal trap, were not about revenge but about protecting what was rightfully mine, about standing firm in my integrity. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about moving forward. I forgave Emily, not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger and resentment would have only poisoned my future. Forgiveness allowed me to let go, to release the burden of their betrayal, and to focus on my own path. Solitude can be a sanctuary. In the silence of my new apartment, I found peace. I learned to enjoy my own company, to find strength in solitude, and to appreciate the quiet moments that once felt so empty. It was in this solitude that I rediscovered myself, my passions, and my purpose. Life is unpredictable, but resilience is key. The ordeal with Emily and Mark was a storm that tested my resilience. I learned that life's trials are not just obstacles. They are opportunities to grow. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.